Okay, I've got update number 3. A couple of things happened, interesting things that happened. One about the FAA, what the FAA has done, what their action items are, what their plan is, how to deal with the B17 9o9 accident and fallout of the final report, and also clarification on CO, poisoning, and some other medical issues. So stick with us on Flywire. Hey, Scott Perdue here on Flywire, and today we're going to do update number 3 for the B17 9o9 final report. Interesting developments today. So the first one is I'm going to talk to Dr. Brent Blue here in a second, and he's my medical liaison that helps me with evaluate my medical details for this accident at least, and. He's clarifying the CO poisoning issue and how long the exposure was likely to be and its effect on the crew during the accident. So without further ado, let's check it out.
All right, I have Dr. Brent Blue with me here, and he's my medical support team to look at this accident. As I said in the previous update on this topic, I sent him the medical documents that were part of the FAA docket, the NTSB docket, sorry, on this investigation, and he reviewed them. Brent, could you tell us what you found?
Well, Scott, you had a concern about whether or not carbon monoxide may have been present prior to the actual accident. And certainly carbon monoxide is one of those things that can definitely impair a pilot. But in this situation, because of the findings at autopsy, I think this was all after the accident. And the reason I say that is that the injuries that the pilot had were not immediately fatal from a traumatic point of view. And what I mean by that is that he didn't have like a ruptured aorta or a ruptured heart or something that he would have been dead in 30 seconds. And what happens in a situation like this, where a pilot may be unconscious or at least unable to extricate themselves from their position, it's like if you get close to a bonfire, you back up because there's heat. But in a situation like that, he's not going to be backing up because he's stuck or he's unconscious. And so you get tremendous levels of carbon monoxide exposure. And if the pilot's sitting there breathing for a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, that's enough to raise that level to 18 parts per million, or not 18 parts per million, but 18%. But I think the other issue is on the autopsy, there was soot not only in the mouth, but in the bronchial tubes. And that definitely implies that the pilot was breathing during the fire before he expired. And that's what raises that level up very high. You have to remember that carbon monoxide has a much higher affinity for hemoglobin than oxygen, and it's by a factor of about 10. And so it does not take very long for very high levels of carbon monoxide to get into the bloodstream. So that's really what I think happened as far as the high levels of carbon monoxide. I did not think that was a pre-accident problem.
Okay. And the 18% in the captain and the 16% in the co-pilot, those numbers, we can believe that those numbers are probably what happened in the accident, because once respiration stopped, pretty much that the blow off of that CO gas release from the hemoglobin isn't going to happen.
Well, and also they're in a high exposure area until they died, and so they're even if there was never a point where they could have been breathing off the carbon monoxide. And the half-life of carbon monoxide in the blood is about 8 hours in room air, meaning that if you have, say, a level of 10 and you're breathing air and you're not being exposed any longer, it would take 8 hours for it to drop down to 5, then 8 more hours to be 2.5. If you're on high flow oxygen or on a ventilator on high flow oxygen, then that decreases the half-life, but it's still a significant amount of time. The other thing that happens just for pilots, just in general, understand is that carbon monoxide is measured in the blood, but there is also a tissue effect and carbon monoxide, particularly on the mitochondria of the cells. And so one of the things that's important for pilots to understand is exposure to carbon monoxide at altitude is sort of a double whammy, the combination of the carbon monoxide effect and hypoxia. So you have to be very, very careful about carbon monoxide, particularly in single engine aircraft.
Let's see if I understand. So if you are exposed for multiple times over long periods, then the half-life of the carbon monoxide is blown off every 8 hours, but it can also get into your cells and build up over time.
That's correct. Chronic exposure can definitely cause things like headache and blurred vision and just kind of feeling out of sorts and so on. But the lesson learned here for your GA pilot is that if they've got a leak into their cabin of carbon monoxide, it can definitely be significant, even though it may not be over a single flight. It might be over flights over days, and that can be pretty bad. One of the reasons we know about the mitochondria now is that we used to think that just giving people high flow oxygen and bringing their levels down into below 5, that was pretty much all we needed to do. But there are many studies now that show that high flow oxygen for extended periods of time, even after the carbon monoxide level has dropped, or hyperbaric oxygen, can be beneficial in preventing long-term damage.
Interesting. Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the NTSB, the people that did the medical investigation, did anything but check the toxic or the level of carbon monoxide and the other things in the blood. They didn't check the cells or anything like that. So
no,
we don't know.
There's really no easy way to check the cellular level of the carbon dioxide.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
I mean, they could do it in academic centers, but it's a very specific kind of test, and I doubt that in fact, I'm sure the FAA does not do that.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, we were also talking in background, we were talking about this, and I mentioned that the pilot had 3 DUIs and had actually had his medical revoked and then given back over time. What do you think the risk factors of alcoholism is? Because 3 DUIs probably is an indicator that there's a severe alcohol problem.
Yes, and the FAA, if they were doing their job through the HIMSS program when they gave him his medical back, should have been doing random testing, and many times they stopped doing that random testing. So it's hard to know what was going on in this specific situation. But people who are big league drinkers are subject to developing what is called organic brain syndrome, which is basically just you've heard people called rummy in the past. They're basically, they literally can get brain atrophy that will affect their cognitive abilities with chronic alcohol exposure. And that exposure, generally the organic brain syndrome with a person, as a person drinks, it generally will stop when they stop drinking, but it will still progress a little bit as time goes on. So that plus age, you make you wonder, well, why would this guy make such crazy decisions as he made in this situation? And it's always easy to armchair quarterback, but it just seems like there was something going on here where he made really bad decisions.
Yeah, that I totally agree. And people say he was a good pilot, but he made really terrible decisions. So that was my original thought, was maybe carbon monoxide poisoning was a reason for that. But you're suggesting the possibility, we don't know because they didn't follow up with the testing to determine this. But that's the brain atrophy and its effect on cognitive ability might have been one of the causes of his poor decision making in this accident.
Correct.
Okay. Well, thank you. So the other thing he had was he had two drugs for hypertension and arrhythmia that are approved with a special or with evaluation, and he didn't declare them. So what do you think? I think that's a problem, but whatever. What do you think that effect had on his medical condition as far as flying that flight?
I don't think the medications themselves had an effect. Uh, I guess the thing would be of more concern is if he hid those medications, which are approved. I mean, they're not even a special issuance approval for the most part. What are called khaki approval, which conditions AME can issue. If he lied about those, then you have to be wondering if he's lying about other conditions or other medical issues or even drinking again. So I mean, no, that's all conjecture, but lying about those medications is I mean, those are pretty benign with the FAA, and so that's the reason I don't understand why he would do that.
I don't either. It's just I don't understand it at all. The co-pilot, he had some of the same situation. I think he also had soot in his lungs, but I believe in my layperson read of that, he died much quicker from the impact.
As I recall, and I don't have the report right in front of me, but he had soot in his oral pharynx, meaning his nose and his mouth, but did not have it down deep in his lungs like the pilot did. So he did not breathe it as long as the pilot did.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for elucidating this issue, especially with regards to CO, the CO poisoning and how it would persist and one of the other risk factors and stuff like that. Very interesting. I appreciate that.
My pleasure, Scott. Thank you for having me.
All right.
I just want to thank Dr. Blue for talking to us about CO poisoning and some of the other medical issues. I really appreciate that. And the other one I wanted to talk about was some of the FAA reaction. I guess they knew what the final report is. They've already talked about it, and they've come up with a plan, and they've been implementing that plan since about December of last year. So in December of last year, they issued a notice this is a summary of the different things that they're doing and their plan of action. They issued a notice that required the inspection of 100% of all living history flight experience exemption holders prior to the close of fiscal 2021. So as of now, they've got until the end of September to do that. Produced new LHFE oversight guidance for the inspector workforce, and that was published in December of 2020 as well. They developed an inspector training course within the FAA Academy. This course is in its final stages with an expected rollout of early May this month in 2021. And that course is going to be more in-depth on how to properly do the job of maintaining oversight over LHFE organizations. They conducted a webinar for all LHFE exemption holders in January of 2021 to brief the industry of the upcoming oversight enhancements, and they usually do this at a National Warbird Operators Conference, NWOC. They completed the LMS HFE Inspector Training Course, which they were talking about before, continues to commit resources to work with LHFE exemption holders. However, events surrounding COVID have slowed the onboarding inspection process for new additions to the LHFE fleet. Continues inclusion of the industry participation and implementation of mandates imposed by Section 532 of the 2018 FAA Reauthorization Act. I'm not really sure what that means. I'll check into it. Is currently training inspectors one-on-one in LHFE oversight. We'll meet with industry groups. I guess this has happened already in March, with 3 additional meetings planned for Sun and Fun, which just happened, AirVenture in July, and then ICAS, the International Council of Air Shows, which is the air show meeting in December in Vegas. And everybody involved in air shows, in particular the Warbirds, are going to be there, and they're going to talk about the different programs that they're doing. Action items, that's called the office that deals with this is called AFX 800. They assigned 2 inspectors to visit maintenance facility, the Collings Foundation maintenance facility and review other Collings aircraft. And due to the gross violations of the Collings exemption, AFS 500 revoked the LHFE for Collings Foundation. They asked for reinstatement and that was denied. And that's the way it sits right now. Collings does not have an LHFE exemption anymore. So they have to start from square one. And apparently they have bought a B17 to replace 909. AFX has identified the FSDOs who will monitor other LHFE operators. And my take on this is they're not going to have every FSDO, if that LHFE operates within their FSDO, they're going to be in charge of it. Apparently they're going to only designate a few FSDOs to have oversight over the LHFE operators. So it kind of takes a little bit out of the FSDO hands, at least the local FSDO. AFX has made LHFE operations a special interest item and has added regular surveillance to their inspectors and their guidance, okay? They have stated that this accident, this is the position of the FAA, that this accident, the Collings accident, does not emulate other LHFE operators, and their intention is to not kill the LHFE program, which I think is good news. Sounds like they're doing some stuff to tighten it up, and hopefully they're involving industry instead of just briefing them on this. So that's good news, and I thought you might be interested in the update. So hope you enjoyed the video, and well, we'll see you next time on Flywire.